Welcome to Beyond the Expert. It's a brand new product out of AGORACOM in which we're speaking with investment experts in the small cap space. This is going to be the first in our series and the first one with Leigh Hughes. You see him on the screen right now, venture capitalist that I've been following for months with an unbelievable track record because he brings fantastic due diligence. I don't think I've seen anyone outside of Sheldon Inwintosh go deeper and do better due diligence than Leigh. And he's also got the ear of some of the world's biggest funds that are applicable to the spaces in the small cap industry. And he's advisor to several of these companies as well. So let's have our first one together. Leigh, welcome to the show.
Thanks, George. Appreciate the intro.
Hey, look, I appreciate what you've been able to bring to the small cap world in terms of you're on boards, advisory boards. You're bringing big funds to the table who are paying attention to some of these investments. We're going to talk today about three companies: Mountain Valley MD, Xphyto Therapeutics, and Valeo Pharma. But before we get to those, give us 2 or 3 minutes on you and why people at home who are watching this or listening by podcast, what they should know about you in terms of the kind of time and effort you bring into your research and that you bring into bring in investment, from companies around the world into these small caps.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it'll be really brief, but from Australia, living in Vancouver, Canada right now, what better place to live when it comes to, I guess, the junior micro caps companies. I've been fortunate enough to be able to work with some pretty significant private equity funds over the last 3 to 5 years, not just here in Canada, but also in Europe and parts of Australasia. And also, I've been fortunate enough because of work that I did in Australia, working with a plethora of mining companies, not just junior explorers, but also blue chips. Fortunate enough to be able to work with some very significant businesses, producers across multiple fields in Australia. Through that, I've been able to work with a lot of the institutional side of investment, which obviously is a good place to learn and cut your craft. Now, coming over here to Canada and looking and seeing how obviously capital gets deployed with some of these disruptive, extremely talented junior microcap companies, putting some of that, I guess, perspective of what happens at private equity institutional world into some of these really undervalued, undernourished businesses and watching them grow has been super exciting. And I think we're seeing that, over the last 12 to 18 months, we've just seen so many, I guess, vertical darlings, if you want to call it, out of Canada, really take the world stage and put themselves out there.
You've accomplished something. Of the many things you've accomplished, I'll tell you what I'm most impressed about. And I'm impressed with a lot of stuff you do. But the one thing you've done is you've been able to bring private equity money into Canadian deals that I've always wondered, but I never had the contacts, but I've always wondered, why aren't big private equity funds from around the world taking a look at these Canadian small caps? They're highly regulated, great reporting, liquidity, everything you want, and undervalued. I mean, just some of the companies like Mountain Valley MD that it was 10 cents just a few months ago, but the world didn't know about them. And you brought those companies, you brought that private money, that fund money into these companies. What is their appetite for the Canadian markets now that they've had a taste from you?
Well, I wouldn't just say it's from me. I think we're seeing a lot of really, high performers this year that have just accelerated their growth potential, and we're seeing it now. So I wouldn't just say it's me, but I'm looking at some of the mandates and seeing how some of the mandates of these funds or institutions or even high net worth venture capitalists, how they've changed their risk profile to be a little bit more risk adverse. It's private equity, gone are the days where a 10% return over the year, a combined average return over the year is considered a big success. The ability to get access to information now on businesses is second to none. I mean, we're stuck in our homes. We're kind of forced to adopt a new way of accessing information about a business. And look, I've seen a particular, a few funds that are prepared to clip off a little bit of their portfolio and maybe put that into the higher risk bracket, because why would they miss out on these opportunities that, retail investors are clearly taking advantage of? and to what? To maybe make their funds a little bit more robust going into the future when we possibly will see, you know, market sentiment dip off a little bit, you know, whenever that takes place.
Yeah, the amazing thing is if I'm George Co private equity and I've got $100 million in my fund and I'm used to making 10%, if I cut out just 2% of that and say, all right, you know, I'm going to list the guys like Leigh and others and find some great companies in the Canadian small cap markets. Well, if that 2% doubles or triples, man, the overall performance of the fund just skyrockets, and all you do is risk a couple percent of the portfolio on some really great small caps. So that's got to be a big part of this, and you've done a great job at that, man.
Yeah, George, honestly, like, you know, think about a few sectors right now. Think about biotech. Think about what biotech looked like 2 or 3 years ago.
Dead. You know? Like in Canada, dead.
Yeah.
I'd even look at them.
Could quite possibly couldn't even get a bid, some of these companies.
Yeah.
You know? Think about disruptive tech, you know, AI, you know, there's all these new acronyms and that are you know, buzzwords.
Augmented reality, virtual reality, immersive experience, all of this.
Exactly. EV. I mean, we're seeing these EV companies just absolutely go crazy right now and blow up because obviously the need for, you know, people are now more aware of what the EV space is going to do for our future. These disruptive tech categories to me are an amazing place to be. And what better place to be doing that than in Canada, as we know, where, you know, people are very aggressive when it comes to their investment capital. And we're seeing a lot of that now.
Yeah, and that's where you and I are in agreement that the next decade, the AGORACOM thesis is this decade will be dominated by disruptive tech small cap companies that will generate 3 times more wealth in the last 3 decades combined. That's how big it's going to be, in my opinion. I don't know if I'm too aggressive or if you think more than that.
No, I don't. We were just talking about it before we started this, you know, CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, which is held in Vegas every January, you know, I mean, hundreds of thousands of people go and attend it. I've attended it a couple of times. This year I attended it virtually, which, you know, was a new experience. But wow, talk about the presentation capabilities of some of these companies and how creative they've got to be able to make that such an amazing experience. It was fantastic. But, you know, one of the wrap-ups from that key speakers were stating was they've never seen such a huge gap get filled with disruption last year because we were forced to adopt and adapt than now. I mean, maybe even 5 to 10 years of light speed creativity all wrapped in 1 year to now see that potential come to the marketplace right now it gives me goosebumps sometimes, to be honest with you.
We just had, and then we'll continue the conversation about the companies, but we just had our first client hit $1 billion market cap and blew past it. Pyrogenesis, PYR, TSX on its way to NASDAQ and hit $1.4 billion. It's the first one, right? But Leigh, you think there are going to be multiple $1 billion companies coming out of the small cap exchanges,
honestly,
in the next few years?
I really do believe that. You know, I can give you a couple of examples as well, you know, of what I think is going to happen this year with some of these businesses. I mean, honestly, I think biotech is going to create some big unicorns for Canada. The fintech category to me is an amazing category to be in. I think we've got a co-client there in Peak Fintech that are about to, you know, see their journey go to the NASDAQ and maybe even the big board TSX. I mean, what an amazing, you know, rapid growth they've seen in 6 to 8 months. You know, disruptive tech, call it, that's obviously very, very broad speaking right now, but, you know, and obviously we see crypto coming in and becoming a lot, you know, more accepted by, you know, the broader marketplace. There's so many companies here in Canada that are sitting right in that niche environment. I mean, we're talking about Voyager before, Voyager Digital, $21 stock, couple of $1 billion market cap, nearly just raised $200 million in, I think, overnight. I mean,
this just didn't happen in the small cap world. I've been doing this for 23 years. It just didn't happen. And now, and even 3 years ago, it wasn't on the radar, except for some cannabis stuff. Obviously that was more of a craze, but now it's happening to great companies quite often. Bond deals, big financings.
Agree. I mean, you can bet your bottom dollar that the big pharma and big tech aren't going to be missing out on the mushroom space, the psychedelic space, like they did with cannabis. You can clearly tell that, right? So, yeah, I think people are just, and at the pointy end in the big private equity or institutional world are just, they're paying to play. It's good. It's good to see.
All right. Let's talk about, I mean, we got the great thing about this series for everybody at home, this series, is that we're going to be talking about dozens of companies, but we're not going to cover them all in one day, but that's why this is going to be a great series. So today it's like, we're more on the life sciences pharma side. We've got Mountain Valley MD, Xphyto Therapeutics, and Valeo Pharma. So let's start off, Leigh, if it's okay with you, of Mountain Valley MD, which, if you don't know, trades on the CSE. I know you know, but for people at home, MVMD, and in the US, MVMDF. My brief intro: to understand this company, all you have to know is they take existing vaccines and drugs and deliver them better, both into the body and into the world, way better, potentially global changing. Let's talk about Mountain Valley MD. Tell the world what they need to know as far as what they do, and then tell the world where you think it could be headed as a company.
Look, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, George, to be honest with you. It's a very difficult story, actually, to tell the broader market or retail because of just how technical it is. And obviously, with the amount of verticals that it's, doing business in. When I first met Mountain Valley, end of November last year, I was really fascinated by Mike Farber, who's their head of life sciences. And I know you've spoken to him, such a powerful human being, actually, with his storytelling and how he wants to change the world. Was initially, for me, it was the disruption that Mountain Valley MD can have in the ability to potentially bypass cold chain. Understanding now that logistics and transportation of vaccines is in somewhat one of the hardest challenges that the world has to be able to eradicate diseases. And it's simply, a lot of it is because of that issue of transportation and logistics.
And if you don't mind, because there are going to be a lot of new people,
yeah,
what is the cold chain and the problem that it, in 30 seconds, because it's easy to understand, but I want them to hear it from you. How things are.
And please, obviously, just for the audience, just understand that I'm not a scientist or a technical person, so I'm going to do my best here. But vaccines having to sit within a particular tempered environment, I think it's 2 to 8 degrees or something like that, and having to be sitting in a refrigerated environment as well, and then moved all around the world via transportation methods, obviously needs a lot of power, and it needs and it needs a lot of logistics effort. Now, imagine if you can take a potential vaccine and have it storing outside of that cold chain environment. So simply 20 to 40 degrees, and have a life cycle that's, maybe years, and with an efficacy level that is extremely high. I mean, that's a game changer. You're talking about things like polio and other, diseases or chronic illnesses, whatever you may want to call them, that have not been eradicated, and simply because of that issue. Now, imagine
for everyone at home, they can't get rid of polio because there are villages in India and Asia, parts of Asia and parts of the world that, man, they don't have grid power, let alone infrastructure, cold chain. That's why these things still exist. MVMD is developing technology that for vaccines to exist outside of that.
Yeah.
With that.
Exactly. And, that's a multi-billion-dollar lane on its own. Dennis, the CEO, talks about that a lot. Obviously we're in COVID times right now. Vaccines are being rolled out, some of them with hesitation by, not just the broader marketplace, but governments as well. We're seeing that maybe people are having to treat with caution. We're now seeing that there's a potential drug called ivermectin, which is off patent. I think Merck had the initial patent. Originally, it's sold as a tablet form. One of the great things that Mountain Valley has been able to do is take ivermectin and put it into a solubilized form, and then look at how that can then be used and treated and delivered in another way, simply. In a solubilized form, being delivered to every human or every animal across the planet, to potentially, as some of the key advocates across the globe are saying potentially eradicate the COVID, or sorry, exterminate COVID-19 is something serious that business is taking serious. It's just gone to, I think, level 4 biosecurity clinical trial testing, which has been accelerated. You're talking a 3-year process to normally get that to even take place. It has been put forward within 4 to 6 weeks. That happens for a reason. We're seeing the ivermectin story now go global. We're seeing a lot of countries, underground health organizations use it because of its anti-parasitic nature to treat some of the symptoms or even the disease of COVID-19. Mountain Valley's in that lane. The other lane is, dose sparing. Imagine being able to take a particular vaccine that we used to have injected in our bodies and now have it maybe delivered in an oral dissolvable film or sublingual, whatever you want to call it, with 1/8 less or 7/8 less of what we needed to take before, which is i.e. dose sparing. Again, I mean, the treatment of that, not just in a COVID-19 vaccine, but for potentially multiple different, uses.
I think it bears saying, Leigh, that Mountain Valley actually isn't primarily a COVID-19 emphasis. Their number one emphasis right now is polio.
When I got involved when I chose to get involved with Mountain Valley as an advisor, the ivermectin COVID-19 story narrative wasn't even there, right? So people have jumped on that, of course. I honestly believe that it's probably one of the smallest lanes that the business is in, right. But again, it's a multi-billion-dollar lane. Big Pharma are waking up. On the stock side, as you've seen, I mean, we go back to, building a backbone of a business or a spine of a business today through, looking at institutional and private equity world to take positions. I mean, the business is, I think it's traded over 200 million shares in 6 to 8 weeks, which is just amazing, with, very, very, very little awareness and marketing activity of that the typical companies would do, but we've been extremely selective. Obviously, AGORACOM's been a great platform for that and getting the message out. And look, I honestly believe in the Mountain Valley MD life cycle from an investment perspective, in terms of what's being told to the marketplace and the upside. I still think we're at 5 to 10% of what that could possibly look like.
Man, and you know what I love about it, Leigh? It's not just exciting from a capital markets point of view, because we all like to make money, but man, somebody actually posted this to Twitter, and I thought about it. I said, he's right. They said that Mountain Valley, if they pull this off, and man, they seem like they're close to it, they could win a Nobel Peace Prize for this.
Yeah, look, the following has become quite viral, to be honest, and for good reason. You just got to listen to the operators. Listen to Mike Farber. I could literally spend days listening to that guy talk about what he wants to do to be a change maker or a change agent in the world of the lane that he's living in. The guy lives at work. He lives and breathes that business, and he's not going to stop. The CEO, Dennis Hancock, very impressive operator, very diligent with his approach of unraveling the narrative that is Mountain Valley MD. It's being done with a lot of patience, although they're getting a lot of stakeholders and businesses across the world trying to force them to move faster, of course, because of how exciting the narrative in the business is. But of course, as you know, look, and again, Canadian biotech, right? It's a 500 million market cap, I think, today, but I honestly believe that it has all the upside to be another Canadian unicorn, possibly in 2021. And, that's exciting.
And by the way, and then we'll move on to Valeo. The reason a lot of people don't know this, but Leigh came in our last interview with Mike Farber. You said he literally works day and night. His father, and he shared this with us online, so I'm not sharing anything private, but it's very touching. It's one of the most emotional, powerful moments we've had in an AGORACOM interview. His father had a lifelong difficulty with polio, ended up dying from it.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many great things come in this world because someone young lost someone to something, and they just became so determined to solve that problem. And he's right there. So, man, we could keep talking about Mountain Valley,
Good.
but I want to make sure people knew this isn't just a profit game, right? We're all capital markets people. We know there's money to be made, but if you can help save big parts of the world, I think you take pride in your company at that point.
Well, that's why I love the pharmaceutical, healthcare, and biotech space, to be honest, George.
Next company, let's talk about Valeo Pharma. For everyone at home, trades under VPH and VPHIF. And again, an AGORACOM client, full disclosure, but we're talking to Leigh about his thoughts. For those of you who are new to that company, so what you need to do, it's not very difficult to understand. They're already a commercial stage revenue generating Canadian pharmaceutical company. And what they do is they acquire Canadian rights to, commercial, already proprietary drugs that have already been commercialized, and they just acquire the Canadian rights, and then they sell them into the Canadian market. I know it sounds almost too easy, but there are a lot of specialty drugs out there where the Canadian market just isn't big enough for a drug company to come after the market. So Valeo kind of fills that gap, and they're approaching EBITDA positive. They got 9 products currently marketed with a $40 million estimated peak in sales per year. Another 7 in the pipe for another $45 million, and their blood thinner, for lack of a better term, is just got approved, and I think that alone could do $30 million a year when it's up and running pretty soon. So this is a great company. Talk to us about Valeo, Leigh.
Yeah, look, I started getting involved with Valeo April last year. Just became really attracted to their CEO Steve Saviuk and the way he has built businesses in the past and understands the generic pharmaceutical world. He's done some pretty significant transactions in the past. And, after seeing where Valeo was in April, I guess they were at a very serious inflection point to, really rapidly, grow the bottom line and also have a healthy balance sheet for the business. It's been sitting idle and building over a number of years. You're right. Some of the generic off-patent drugs that they've been able to lock down with, exclusivity across, various geographic countries, I guess you could say. Massive marketplaces. You look at Redesca. I mean, you hit the nail on the head there again, George. $30 million in revenue to me is a blip. I think they can do a lot more. They can become a lot competitive in their space. They've got Xphyto, which is another nutraceutical, which I know that they've just started shipping and distributing even with Amazon down in the US.
Just ordered our first one. It came a few days ago, so we're going to be showing that at some point.
Yeah, there you go. And there's research projects taking place there. You're going to really see the acceleration of some of their other drugs, which Yondelis and a few of the other ones that they actually took to their shareholders last year, actually, and announced Q3, Q4, I believe. Going back, there's been such a lot of stuff that's happened with Valeo last year. I do know that Valeo unfortunately got stuck in the queue with Health Canada on some approvals and other things in Q4 last year, which slowed things down a little bit. But at the same time, when things slow down a little bit there, it allows the business to catch up. I went to Valeo's warehouse in December last year or November last year. It was just, it's a serious facility. You go down the back, there's just new refrigerated units all ready to go to stock up, restock. And that's all got to go somewhere. They're certainly not just investing capital into a big warehouse and refrigerators to have them empty. So 2021, I know for the business is going to be one about execution and deployment on the revenue side. And from what I've been told too, I know that management are in talks with all the time about increasing that product list.
Of course, that's their job.
That's their job, exactly. And Steve's a smart guy. He's been doing this for a very long time. He just brought in a new chief operating officer, I believe, who has big boy experience with big pharma. So I'm sure that if you can connect the dots and read between the lines there, that's been done for a reason. And look, I see the company is well capitalized. Bought deal last year, and I think Q3 or Q4 last year we got a bought deal done with some good names. So they're capitalized, they're dangerous, they have wings, they have wind in their sail, as to speak. And Steve's got a runway now of, the whole year to try and get his revenue up. I think there was some forward projections. Correct me if I'm wrong, George, because I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I even think that there was some projections of maybe, $30 to $60 million being a target at some point. Now, if you look at multiples on that, I mean, in that space, I'm looking at Medexus's and HLS Therapeutics and a few others, they're trading at 7 to 10 times revenue, some of them. I mean, I think Valeo's a what, 100 and, or maybe
I've got it at about a $75 million market cap right now.
There you go. So upside, I see a lot of upside for this name for sure. And it's a super tight structure as well, which is great. And insiders own a lot.
And for people at home, one thing that's always scared me about small cap pharma is they just don't have enough money to get through all the testing and development. And the great thing about Valeo, it's an in-licensed business model. So they got no development or clinical risk. They literally go to AGORACOM Pharma somewhere in Europe, who's serving some big markets there, doesn't really have a desire to sell their products in Canada because they don't have any contacts, too expensive to start. And remember, Canada's 35 million people at the end of the day, right? Just too expensive and too risky. So Valeo goes to AGORACOM Pharma and says, hey, we're going to take that. We'd like to take that ABC drug that's already been proven, already gone through clinical trials, already successful. And we just want to license it and bring it to Canada. And you know what AGORACOM Pharma says? Great. We didn't have plans going to Canada anyways. So if you can take it and we enter into a licensing deal, that's just extra money that we never thought existed. So it's a fantastic business model. And that's what they did with the blood thinner that you just mentioned earlier. It's proven, it's been around the world, and it's cheaper. That's why the company's so that put out that press release said they think they can do $30 million a year from it, because every hospital needs it. They don't have to convince everybody. Everybody needs this blood thinner drugs. But the difference is Valeo can deliver it cheaper than the competition. And if you know about the health space, where it's all government in Canada, if they can save money on a massive product like blood thinner that everyone needs, they're going to do it. So, that's just an example of Valeo and why we both like it so much. I'm going to move on to Xphyto, unless you want to add something on there about Valeo.
Yeah, just one other thing there. And I think it's important because you mentioned it with the Mountain Valley MD. And I'm like you. I come from cut from the same cloth, I guess you could speak. Is I really do like these businesses because not only are they disruptors, but they're disruptors in a good way. From they're doing things to make the healthcare sector better, and to me, that's a good thing.
Yeah, good point. Very, very good point. And last company, Xphyto Therapeutics, XPHY in Canada, XPHYF in the US. I'll give the brief description there. They're a technology accelerator at the forefront of bioscience innovation. So what they're doing is they're incubating next generation biosciences to solve, 2021 health issues in the infectious disease screening market, as well as developing psychedelics to treat multiple mental health issues. So they're focusing on right now commercialization of a rapid COVID-19 PCR test, psychedelic API production and drug formulation, and drug formulation and delivery. So that's a good 30,000 foot shot there for all of you at home. Tell us about Leigh, why you really are bullish on Xphyto.
Yeah, another narrative that's very tricky to tell a retail audience, especially in this format. But look, I've actually been involved with Xphyto full disclosure, as a private investor, late 2017, early 2018. That's how forward-looking this business was. New drug delivery methods, taking compounds and making them synthetic, or working with different molecules and working out ways to be able to deliver them better. Again, with dose sparing and bioavailability at front of mind, has been in Xphyto's tank since back then. The business, and to give you an example, the business is working right now in the fields of, epilepsy. How do they take an Epidiolex from a GW Pharma that just got acquired by Jazz Pharma, I think for $7 point something billion, by the way, and deliver it better? They're going to be doing that through an ODF, an oral dissolvable film, which is cheaper, higher bioavailability, and easier to take from absorption. They're working on being able to redeliver, Parkinson's drugs to be transdermal patches. They're working on multiple different, diseases and illnesses that obviously, we want to go away, and ways to be able to treat the symptoms of that. The business is working in extraction methods to be able to obviously take things in the psilocybin or the mushroom space and actually create, real APIs. There was an agreement or relationship that just got announced last week with a company called API out of Canada, using licenses to be able to, extract and take different psilocybin compounds or molecules and produce them as real synthetic drugs. I know that there's a lot of businesses in that space in Canada saying that they're going to do that, or they're applying to do that. Xphyto's doing it.
Yep. I mean, their rapid COVID-19, just example, their rapid COVID-19 PCR test, which can provide results in 25 minutes. They're saying production is going to launch here in Q1 2021. These guys are making it happen. They're not just using it as a buzzword.
100%. You would have seen that there was a press release out in Q4 last year where, there was the appointment of a Norwegian advisory firm, and also a director that joined from Norway. I mean, that's serious. That's serious capital when you start talking about Scandinavian markets like that. They've got an executive team and an advisory and a science team out of Germany that are on. You just got to Google the guys and look at their resumes. I mean, one of the guys there is, I think the only thing he hasn't won is a Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, the guy's considered top tier in his field. In biotech, a lot of these guys have been around the CureVacs and the BioNTechs and all these biotech names now that it's sort of becoming household out of Germany. The diagnostics space or arena that they're playing in is serious. The PCR test that I know that people are waiting on the edge of their seats for the results on that. Hopefully getting gold standard CE mark approval out of Europe is a game changer. You then can start to talk about serious commercialization now with big corporate. And, there's been a lot of Canadian companies or American companies that have entered the space. They've really tried. They've really tried. Abbott's as well to play this testing environment, and a lot have failed. A lot have failed. A lot are still doing great work and succeeding. And, Xphyto is really positioned at the top of that group of, I think, the ones that are going to become very, very successful in this arena.
And Leigh, that's why I think you're so important to small cap investors, why this Beyond the Expert series that we're going to be doing with you is so important. Because look, I can recite what they do. I can even recite things like, their first product launch could be in Q1 2021, and that's impressive, right? That's great. Okay, good. But what you bring to the table is the universal view of what's going on around these companies. Just the fact that you said that right there, that so many companies have tried and failed. I don't know that. For all I know, there are 10 other companies in the running who are bigger, stronger. I have no way to really assess the risk totally, right?
Yeah.
But you can, and you put your money where your mouth is, because you invest these companies,
yeah.
you advise these companies, and that's why this is so important, man.
Yeah, and the testing environment too that I think people get a little bit confused about is they see a company getting into the diagnostic space, and they're going to go and try and do these COVID-19 tests, whatever it is, lateral flow PCR, whatever it might be, antigen tests, and get scared because they go, wow, okay, what happens then though if they become successful? Do they have the capital to manufacture? How does that whole process work? Well, the beauty about Xphyto is that they've built a platform that enables them to partner with manufacturers. There's more than enough manufacturers out there in the world that can do massive scale, and go big size, big scale, big quick. That doesn't come at the expense of the business. It's at the expense of the partner. So, I think once that narrative sort of comes out into the marketplace a little bit more by the business, I think the shareholders are going to understand, wow, okay, this isn't necessarily a dilutive event because they've now made something work. This is actually a partnership opportunity for the business to maybe partner with, I don't know, and there's plenty of big major pharmaceutical manufacturers. I'm also being very careful about what I say right now too, because I don't want to bring it on over the wall. But think about that for a second. You know, a small company, what, 170 million market cap right now, I think, Xphyto, you know, it's sitting at $2 to $3. It's been an extremely high performer over a couple of years now, from go public at 50 cents, and it's considered to go well. Think about that company now having the opportunity to play in a space at 170 million market cap out of Canada. That sector is in the multi billions of dollars on the commercial front. And that's pretty cool. That's pretty exciting, you know, and then not having to worry about the manufacturing side of it too, because simply they can go and partner with someone and enable all of that to take place and be rolled out at mass scale. I mean, that's a cool story.
Hey, Leigh, we're going to end it there because the fact of the matter is we could talk about Mountain Valley MD for an hour, Xphyto for an hour, and Valeo for an hour. But I think we've accomplished our goal here in the first interview of this series, which is give investors a really good look from, you know, from the inside and the outside into each one of these companies, and let them go do their due diligence, which, by the way, so full disclosure, all three of these companies are clients of AGORACOM Relations. So you got to know that. And Leigh, let us know on each one. On Mountain Valley Investor Advisors, let us know your status in each one of those for full disclosure for everybody.
Yeah, full disclosure. So Mountain Valley MD, publicly announced advisor, and a fortunate one at that. Valeo have been consulting to Valeo since April last year and continue to do so. And Xphyto, the same. So own positions in the business, have done for a very long time. And yeah, that's full disclosure.
All right. So guys, everyone at home, you got to know that. So Zero Hedge always had a great thing in the disclosure. They said, if we're talking about a company, assume we are completely biased. Just assume it. I mean, we're not, we don't talk that way, but assume we are completely conflicted. So you've got to do your due diligence, talk to your financial advisors, do all that. You can't just take our word for it. If you notice, at no time in this interview did we talk about future stock prices and projections and things like that. So we're very careful. We don't want to do that. What we want and what we've accomplished is making sure that you know about this. Now, step two, you want to make sure, I mean, you're going to see Leigh on these interviews, but you want to make sure you follow Leigh all the time. All right. So you look at his screen right there and you can see his Twitter handle, Leigh Hughes, right? At Leigh Hughes, LeighHughes.
Yeah, Leigh M. Hughes, actually. I probably should get rid of the M, but I had to put that in there because that's the first word of my first letter of my middle name. So.
All right. So at Leigh M. Hughes on Twitter. Highly recommend you follow him. One of the best, if nothing else comes out of this, one of the best follows you're ever going to have in the small cap space. Because look, he's always talking about these companies and other companies. So what a great way to stay up to date. And if you want to follow him on LinkedIn as well, you see it right there. Leigh Hughes, simple enough. Leigh, thanks, buddy, thanks for joining us. This was amazing. It's our first one. We really didn't have anything scripted. We won't. We just knew the companies we're going to talk about. And I'm looking forward to doing this. What do you think, Leigh? Once a week, once every 7 to 10 days, max?
Until someone says, don't ever come on again, then I don't know. I'll leave it up to you, George.
No, well, look, we love the knowledge you bring. And like we said at the beginning, you're an established, successful venture capitalist, and you've got great due diligence, and you've got great connections in the private equity world that have made some large investments in Canadian companies already. So, man, it's the opposite.
Thanks, George.
We'll have you on until you say, stop calling me, George.
No, it's good. And I mean, the AGORACOM platform obviously has a very big impact in a lot of these stories and storytelling, right? And I think that's the important part. You hit the nail on the head at the very, very beginning. It's about how we take a really technical story and make it retail worthy. And I think that's what you guys do really, really well. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, we take a lot of pride in that. I mean, MVMD, if anyone read those press releases before we came along, I just looked at them and said, oh my God, I don't have a clue what these guys do. And it took me 2 or 3 days of walking around to try and get that. But Leigh was a big part of that because We spoke for an hour or two trying to really understand what the company does to explain to people. And together we came up with that messaging. And I think that's made a big difference in the company's awareness. So Leigh, thanks for joining us, buddy. This was awesome.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And for everyone at home that you've been watching, or hey, make sure you're listening by podcast. We know you can't always plop down in front of a screen and just watch guys like us. No matter how good Leigh's hair looks, there's only so long you can stare at him for. So make sure you follow by podcast, right? So Spotify, Google, Apple, your favorite podcast platform. Just search for AGORACOM Small Cap. You'll find us, because this series is going to be invaluable in 2021. Add it to your podcast. Listen to it when you're walking. Listen to it when you're working out, or when you just want to relax, and you get great information. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Hope you found it valuable. First ever. We're going to look back on this a year from now and see if we knew what we're talking about. But Leigh, see you again in a week, my friend.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers, everyone.